I'm Elara Quinn. And the day I found out I wasn't invited to my own sister's wedding, the one I paid for, something in me broke. But not in the way they expected. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I opened a drawer and pulled out every receipt, every sacrifice they had quietly buried. This story isn't about revenge. It's about finally telling the truth when no one thinks you'll speak. And if you've ever been the quiet one in the family, the one who gave more than she should, this story is for you. Because silence can be powerful, until it's time to break it. There's a kind of silence that settles in just before the heart breaks. It doesn't scream. It doesn't crack. It just exhales. That's what the morning felt like. The kitchen was bathed in a soft golden hue sunlight dripping lazily through the blinds. Outside, the world stirred, the muffled sound of a garbage truck groaning its way down the block, the faint chirping of birds negotiating space on telephone wires. Inside it was still, peaceful even. I stood barefoot on the cold tile floor holding my favorite mug. It was chipped along the rim, the once glossy blue glaze now faded in places from years of washing. My dad gave it to me the day I moved into my first apartment. For early mornings and long days, he had said, grinning in that quiet, lopsided way of his, I was 20 then, trying hard to look grown, to act like I knew what I was doing. He saw right through me but never said a word. The mug had outlasted almost everything else from those days. Furniture, relationships, even him. I never replaced it. That tiny crack beneath the handle. It reminded me of me. A little worn, a little flawed, but still holding it together. I poured the coffee slowly, watching the steam rise like smoke from an old chimney. The smell, dark and earthy, grounded me. I cradled the mug between my hands and leaned against the counter, ready to ease into another Monday. And then my phone buzzed. Just once. I glanced at it, expecting maybe a calendar alert or one of those early bird emails from my team. But the sender's name made me freeze, Lena. My sister wasn't a morning person or an intentional communicator. The fact that she was texting at 7:42 a.m. already had my stomach folding in on itself. You're not invited to the wedding. Victor's family doesn't feel comfortable with you there. No greeting, no context, no apology, just a line. Sharp. Precise. Like a scalpel. For a moment I thought I read it wrong. I blinked. Read it again. The words didn't change. I didn't breathe. The ceramic mug suddenly felt too cold in my hands, like all the warmth had drained from it the moment her message arrived. I didn't drop it. But I thought about it. Instead, I walked to the kitchen table, pulled out a chair, and sat down slowly. Like every motion had to be carefully measured, or else I'd shatter too. My heart wasn't pounding. It wasn't racing. It was sinking, quietly like a stone sliding off a ledge into deep black water. I stared at the phone, waiting. Maybe there'd be a follow-up text. Just kidding. Or, sorry, that came out wrong. Maybe even a voice memo, her voice sheepish or tired or panicked, but the screen stayed blank. The silence stretched. I felt myself slipping into memory without meaning to. That's the thing about pain. It always knows the shortest road to your past. Lena crying over the phone telling me she couldn't cover rent that month. Again. Lena asking if she could borrow my car while hers was in the shop. Again. Lena overwhelmed and anxious about the wedding planning, saying Victor had lost another freelance contract and they were short for the venue deposit. $5,000. She cried. I wired it that night. There wasn't a spreadsheet big enough to track all the times I said yes when it cost me something. And now, they don't want me there. I remembered our childhood. Not the highlight reel, but the small moments. After Dad died, things shifted. I was 20. She was 12. Our mom. Broke quietly. not all at once, but in slow, invisible pieces. And in the vacuum, I stepped in. Grocery shopping, bills, PTA meetings. I wore 2 jobs and still made it home to cook her dinner. I didn't mind. Or maybe I did, but I told myself it was what big sisters do. But Lena, she got to stay soft. Got to be the dreamer. The one with oil paints and music and long sighs about love and poetry. I watched her float through life while I was the scaffolding no one noticed. And maybe I was okay with that. Until now. Because scaffolding isn't supposed to get kicked out of the building it helped support. The coffee in my mug had cooled. I hadn't even taken a sip. I placed it gently on the table, staring into the dark surface. It no longer gave off steam. It just sat there, quiet like me. Was this it? Was this who I'd been to them all along? A resource, a backup plan, a donor. Never a guest, never a sister. I reached for the mug again, tracing the crack with my thumb. That crack had been there for years. It never leaked, never gave in, just quietly endured. And suddenly I hated it for that. Because I saw myself in it. And maybe, just maybe, I was done being the thing that always held. The silence in the room was louder now, pressing against my ears like altitude. Something in me had shifted. Not shattered, not screamed, just cracked a little deeper. It wasn't rage, not yet. It was clarity. The kind that arrives not in fire, but in the slow, quiet unraveling of old fabric. When you realize it's always been fraying, you just never stopped sewing. I stood up. I didn't know what I would do next, but I knew I wouldn't text back. Not yet. Not until I remembered how to speak like someone who mattered. And this time when I did, it would not be quiet. I thought maybe I had misunderstood the message. That maybe Lena had sent it in frustration or haste, and by the time I called Mom, she would laugh it off and say, "Of course you're invited, sweetie." But I should have known better. "Mom," I said as soon as she picked up, "Lena says I'm not invited to the wedding. Did you know about this?" A pause, that long, quiet kind, the kind that doesn't hide guilt well. Then her voice came, light, too casual. "Oh well. Victor's family is very traditional, you know. They're hosting—" Lena didn't want to make things awkward. "Awkward," I repeated. "I helped pay for the venue, Mom." She sighed like I had just told her it might rain on her garden party. "It's just one day, Elara. Don't overreact. This is Lena's time. Try to be understanding." There it was again. That old family script. Elara, don't make a scene. Elara, be the bigger person. Elara, keep the peace even when it costs you everything. I didn't reply. I just ended the call, slowly lowered the phone onto the kitchen counter and stared out the window like it might offer clarity. But the silence in that room told me everything. I was never meant to be celebrated. I was meant to be useful. I walked to the corner of my living room where my filing cabinet sat like a forgotten monument. 4 drawers, all labeled, all filled with years of being the dependable one. I opened the bottom drawer, the one labeled family. It was packed tight. Organized chaos, really manila folders with names scrawled in blue ink receipts folded into envelopes. Post-it notes, reminding me what month the rent was late or when the tuition bill was due. I pulled out Lena's folder, the flap barely closed anymore. Inside were printouts, check images, crumpled notes in her handwriting. "I swear I'll get it back to you soon," and "You're a lifesaver, sis." Words that felt warm at the time. Now they felt like manipulation dressed in affection. One by one I laid the papers out on the table like puzzle pieces from a life I hadn't let myself examine until now. Rent payments, car repairs, a semester of online classes, vet bills, utilities during winter, and of course, the wedding venue deposit, $5,000 wired from my account to hers late one Friday night when she called me sobbing about losing their booking. I had dropped everything to help her. Again. always again. It wasn't the money. Not really. It was the way they'd always needed me. And the way they discarded me the second I wasn't convenient. Every time Lena had called, I'd said yes. Without thinking. Because that's what big sisters do, right? That's what responsible daughters do. That's what people like me, people who grew up holding their families together like fragile glass, do. I sat down slowly at the table, breathing through the sudden sting behind my eyes. They never once asked if I was okay, if I could afford it, if I needed help. Not once. And now they didn't even want me in the room. I opened my laptop, not to tally up the numbers exactly, but to document them. Not as a budget, not even as evidence, just to name it, to name what I had given. At the top of a blank document, I typed family, non-refundable. And then I wrote, not in rows or columns, not with formulas or totals, just stories. I paid Lena's rent when she lost her job. She never asked how I was doing at mine. I fixed her car the week my own brakes were grinding. I covered her class fees even though she quit halfway through. I loaned her money for the wedding and she didn't invite me. I kept typing. Quiet sentences, fragments of sacrifice, line after line of invisible labor. And as the list grew longer, so did the space between who I had been and who I was starting to become. I was finally seeing it. This wasn't about a wedding. It was about everything leading up to it. About how long I'd let myself be useful without ever being valued. About how love in my family had always come with an asterisk. As long as you don't ask for anything in return. I stared at the last sentence on the page and exhaled. I wasn't keeping a ledger to shame them. I was writing this because no one else would. No one else would remember what I gave, what it cost me, what it meant to always say yes when no one ever did the same for me. This list, raw, imperfect, and deeply personal, wasn't about revenge. It was about recognition. It was about writing myself into the story. And when I closed the laptop, I placed my hands flat on the cover, like sealing a truth I'd waited years to speak. A different kind of silence filled the room then, not empty, but full. And for the first time in a very long time, I wasn't invisible. I was accounted for. I hadn't seen Rowena in years, not since we were interns trading lunch breaks and burnout stories in a dusty government office building downtown. Back then, we were still wide-eyed and believing that hard work alone could shape the world into something fair. Now she was a financial attorney with her own name on the door of a brick building with real oak trim and quiet lighting, a grown-up fortress of numbers and truth. She greeted me at the door with a half smile and a quiet look I couldn't read. "Thanks for coming in, Elara," she said, her voice steady. "We have something strange to look at." She led me to a glass-walled conference room. On the table were printed sheets, a neat stack of manila folders, and her sleek black laptop open to a spreadsheet, the kind of setting that usually meant something important, or something deeply wrong. Rowena tapped a folder. "Your name came up on a list of authorized signatories from Nimbus Edge. You familiar with them?" I nodded. "That's Victor's company." Her eyes didn't waver. "Right. He's listed you as a financial guarantor on several transfers. Well, some marked for scholarships, others for charitable disbursements." "Wait, what?" She slid the folder toward me. "Just take a look." I opened it, feeling the weight of something I couldn't name yet. Line after line of financial transactions scrolled past my eyes, amounts in the thousands, sometimes tens of thousands. Dates account numbers, disbursement notes that included terms like operational reimbursement and grant realignment. And then the signatures. Mine. Over and over again in the bottom right corners. At first I thought maybe I'd forgotten. Maybe I had signed something once quickly, not reading the fine print. Maybe it was buried in one of those late-night calls where someone said, "Can you just help us get this through?" It's nothing big. But as I looked closer, I realized they weren't right. They were close. Same slant, same curve at the top of the E. But not mine. Not truly. I hadn't signed these. My stomach dropped. I never agreed to this. I said, my voice smaller than I intended. Rowena gave me a long look. The kind that lands softly but holds weight. That's what I figured. These documents weren't sent through any of your email addresses. They were submitted by proxy. Proxy. A masked submission. It's a loophole used more often than you'd think, especially when someone trusts the person doing the submitting. I sat back in my chair, the world tilting slightly. My name was on financial records. My name was on loans. My name was on funds I hadn't touched, hadn't known about, hadn't approved. How far does this go? Rowena reached for a second folder, this one thicker, and unwrapped the red cord tied around it. The good news is I have a trail, she said. The bad news. It points to a coordinated structure that looks a lot like laundering. Scholarships, community initiatives, small grants, all set up as fronts. And you, Elara, were the one approving most of it. I didn't speak. Because what do you say when you realize someone didn't just betray your trust? They borrowed your identity to do it. I thought of every conversation I'd had with Victor and Lena over the past year. Their late-night financial stress, the too-good-to-be-true investments, the don't worry, we've got this covered smiles. They hadn't just excluded me from the wedding. They had used me to get there. Can you prove it? I finally asked. I think so, but we'll have to dig deeper. Pull archived records, trace IPs, maybe even subpoena the bank if this turns criminal. I didn't feel fear in that moment. I felt focus. Cold, clear focus. What do you need from me? I asked. Rowena slid a single page toward me. A consent authorization. It allowed her legal access to act on my behalf, to investigate, to retrieve protected records, to build a case. I picked up the pen she laid beside it. My hand hovered for a second. Not because I doubted her, but because this time I wanted the signature to mean something. For years, I had signed checks for others. I had authorized loans, deposits, favors, all to help my family survive whatever new disaster they had walked into. But this signature, this one was for me. I wrote my name slowly, cleanly, as if drawing it into existence for the first time. Rowena gave a soft nod. You just took the first step, she said. I didn't smile. Not yet. But something shifted in my chest, an opening, a possibility. The signature wasn't theirs anymore. It was mine again. I thought maybe, just maybe, Lena would pick up the phone and say, I'm sorry. I got swept up in everything. Can we talk? But when she answered, her voice was already layered in distance. Elara, I need to see you, I said. In person, she sighed. I'm busy the wedding. It won't take long. There was a pause. Then fine. 20 minutes. Victor's out. Come by now if you want. I drove in silence. The streets blurred past me, but my thoughts were louder than the engine. Every mile between us had been built over years, not hours. Every unspoken word, every dismissed feeling, every time I was expected to give without needing anything back. When I arrived, she didn't hug me. She just opened the door and stepped aside barefoot on polished tile, the faint scent of lavender diffusing from a candle near the stairs. The living room looked staged. Perfect cushions, untouched magazines, not a thread out of place. I stood there for a beat before she gestured to the couch. So what's this about I didn't sit? Did you know Victor used my name on financial documents? Her expression flickered. Surprise, or maybe guilt, then quickly masked. I don't know what you're talking about. Rowena found transfer records, authorizations, signatures that aren't mine, linked to Nimbus Edge. She crossed her arms. You're being dramatic, Lena. I said, more tired than angry. This isn't just a misunderstanding. These are serious charges. They used my name to funnel money. Scholarships, grants, offshore accounts. That's Victor's business, she snapped. He handles all that stuff. And you didn't question it. My name, my signature. I thought you helped. You always do. My jaw tightened. Not like that. She looked at me then, for the first time really looking. You always make everything bigger than it is, Elara. You act like you're the only one who sacrifices. I never said that, but it's always implied. That you're the one holding us together. That we should be grateful. Well, maybe we're tired of feeling like we owe you. I blinked. The words didn't sting as much as they numbed. I wasn't asking for gratitude, I said quietly. I just didn't think I had to guard myself against my own family. She looked away. Silence stretched between us, long and brittle. Then I heard footsteps. My mother's. Margot appeared from the hallway in one of her pressed blouse's pearls, still around her neck, like she'd been waiting for a reason to appear polished. What's going on? Elara's upset, Lena said flatly. About the wedding. And money. I didn't even flinch at how she reduced it. My mother's gaze narrowed, then softened in that patronizing way she had perfected over the years. Elara, sweetie, must you always find a problem during special moments? Someone used my name to commit fraud. Mom, don't ruin this for your sister. It's her time. By ruin, do you mean tell the truth? She waved a hand dismissive. Victor's family is handling things. You don't need to insert yourself. I stared at her. They used my name. Maybe it was a mistake, she said. Maybe you did sign something and forgot. I didn't. She shook her head with a pitying smile. You've always been sensitive. But a big sister should know when to step aside. That's part of love, too. Step aside. That was the expectation, wasn't it? For me to be the silent supporter. To swallow my discomfort, my boundaries, my sense of self in the name of keeping peace that only benefited them. I stood there for a long moment, the weight of years pressing down on my chest. Not rage, not grief, just exhaustion. And then I turned to leave. Neither of them stopped me. As I reached the door, my mother added, "You can still come to the ceremony, you know." Just not the reception. It'll be too tight with Victor's cousins flying in. I didn't respond. I closed the door behind me with a soft click that felt heavier than any slam. When I got home, I found myself standing in front of the hallway cabinet without knowing why. I opened the drawer where I kept old photo frames. Snapshots from birthdays, vacations, Thanksgivings. There was one picture in particular I always paused at. A family photo from a beach trip 10 years ago. Dad was still alive then. Lena in sunglasses throwing peace signs. Margot in her floppy sun hat. And me. Half visible at the edge, my face cut off by the edge of the frame, as if I had leaned in too late, or no one had waited for me to be ready. I stared at that photo for a long time. Maybe it was just bad timing, but maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was always symbolic of something I hadn't wanted to name. That in this family I was never centered, just tolerated, until they needed something. And today, standing in my own quiet apartment holding that old frame in my hands, I finally saw the truth I had been avoiding. They didn't want me present. They just wanted me to pay the price for being invisible. We didn't need to say much. In the weeks leading up to the gala, Rowena and I met in quiet corners, her office a small booth at Hickory Street Diner, sometimes my kitchen table, sifting through paper trails that had once been buried in polite silence. There was a rhythm to it. She would hand me documents, and I'd nod. She would mutter something under her breath about fraud law, and I'd mark a signature that didn't belong to me. The truth was scattered everywhere in emails Victor thought were deleted in scanned receipts they never thought I'd see, in the long, careful string of wire transfers routed through shell cherries with names like Hope Bridge Global and Scholar Future Now. Every thread we pulled made the web shake. It wasn't just my name they'd used. It was my credit worthiness, my professional credibility, my clean reputation that had opened bank accounts and pushed funding through to causes that never existed, The forged documents bore my name with near-perfect imitation. But not perfect enough for Rowena. See that loop at the end of your R? They didn't get that, she said, tapping the paper with a capped pen. They copied you, Elara. But they didn't understand you. It should have made me furious. It didn't. There was a time not long ago when I would have sobbed over betrayal like this, or screamed, or asked for explanations they couldn't give. But now, in the soft, lamplit corners of Rowena's office, I felt a different clarity settling in me, like snow after a storm. Still, cold, honest. I didn't want revenge. I wanted release. I don't care if they ever say sorry, I told her one night. I just want it to stop. I want them to stop acting like I owe them the shape of my life. Rowena gave a quiet smile, almost motherly. Then we make sure it ends in daylight. We planned it around the gala, the annual Nimbus Edge fundraiser where Victor would present shiny charts, smile for photos with local politicians, and hand out scholarships that were really just PR stunts wrapped in philanthropy. It was the one place he couldn't pretend. They'll expect another slideshow of bar graphs and staged success stories, Rowena said. What they won't expect is truth. She handed me the flash drive. You sure you want to do this yourself? I looked down at it. Black plastic, unassuming, the entire truth of my erasure in one quiet object. I have to. The morning of the gala, I stood at the mirror longer than I meant to. The dress was simple, navy, with a high neckline, no frills, but it made me feel grounded, like someone who had come to speak, not to please. My old pen sat in the pocket of my coat. Restored now, the crack along its barrel polished away by Rowena's craftsman friend. I'd kept it with me every day since. It wasn't just a pen. It was every time I'd signed something I didn't believe in. Every yes I'd said when I meant no. Every silence I'd swallowed to keep the peace. Tonight I'd use it to write a different ending. We arrived just as the lobby lights dimmed. Inside the ballroom sparkled with glassware and flattery. Waiters passed around flutes of champagne while donors took selfies next to posters boasting impact metrics no one had verified. Victor stood near the stage, animated, gesturing toward a cluster of tech investors with theatrical charm. Lena wasn't far. Her dress a mirror ball of sequins, her laugh rehearsed. They didn't see me. Not yet. Rowena slipped me a discreet nod. We go on in 10. In the side room, we uploaded the file. I adjusted the mic levels, checked the clicker, breathed. When the announcement came, "Please welcome Victor Blaine to the stage." I stayed still. He strode up smiling as if he'd already won. Tonight we celebrate the power of giving. Rowena turned to me, whispered, "You ready?" I stepped out before the applause had finished. Gasps. Whispers. Confusion. But I kept walking. Each step calm, anchored. Victor blinked. "Elara." "What?" "I'll take it from here." Rowena moved behind me and plugged in the flash drive. The screen behind us blinked once, then again, and then slides began to appear. Not the gala visuals. Ours. Forged documents. My name forged beside donations that never reached their destination. Emails between Victor and Wade labeling me as the guaranteed signature, bank transfers to Belize, Grand Cayman, always small enough to stay under the radar, always in my name. The room fell so quiet you could hear glasses shift on silver trays. I didn't narrate. I just let the evidence speak, slide by slide. And then the final slide loaded. White background, black text. They said I was a shadow. But even shadows hold light. I stepped back from the mic. No one clapped. No one moved. But I could feel it. In my chest. In my breath. Not fear. Not pride. Just truth. And that was enough. They didn't find my name on the guest list. I didn't expect them to. The young woman standing at the check-in table blinked up at me with a rehearsed smile, the kind event staff wear like armor. "Could you spell that, please?" she asked, pen hovering. "Elara Quinn," I said clearly, calmly. She scanned the list again. "I'm sorry I don't see you here. This event is by invitation only." Before I could answer, Rowena stepped forward, her voice steady and low. "We're with the Oversight Committee. She's presenting—" The woman's smile faltered. Her eyes darted to the security guard a few feet away, then back to Rowena, who didn't flinch. "I can check with—" "She's presenting," Rowena repeated. "Now please," the woman nodded, stepped aside, and let us through. We walked into the gilded ballroom like a gust of wind no one saw coming. The event was already underway. Jazz floated from hidden speakers. Champagne flutes sparkled under crystal chandeliers. Screens around the room played silent highlight reels, handshakes, scholarship checks, ribbon-cutting ceremonies. Nimbus Edge was showing off its best version of itself. Victor stood at the far end of the room mid-conversation with a group of donors. He laughed easily, his hand on someone's back like he belonged to the room. Lena was close by, her dress shimmering, her smile perfectly placed. They didn't see me. Not yet. We moved quietly through the room, bypassing waiters and polite conversations. At the tech booth near the stage, Rowena handed over a labeled flash drive. "Run this when she walks out," she told the AV manager, who looked confused but nodded. Her presence had that effect. I waited just behind the curtain as Victor took the stage. The applause was warm, expectant. He was good at this, always had been. Smooth voice, broad gestures. He spoke about innovation, about community investment, about the power of partnerships with people you trust. I almost laughed. He wrapped it all in sincerity and charm. And as he segued into the video presentation portion of the night, he turned to gesture toward the screen. That was my cue. I stepped into the spotlight before the applause had finished. There was a moment, just a breath, where no one quite understood what was happening. A flicker of confusion. A murmur. A shifting of weight. Victor's eyes locked on mine. "Elara," he said, the microphone still in his hand. "What are you—" "I'll take it from here." He froze. The AV manager, bless him, did exactly what we asked. The screen blinked once, then switched. Gone were the PR reels. In their place, truth. Slide 1. A scanned image of a forged wire transfer, my name on the approval line. Not my signature. Slide 2. A thread of internal emails between Victor and Wade referencing proxy use of Elara's credentials. Slide 3. Bank records showing a series of small deposits routed through a scholarship initiative to accounts overseas. There were no explanations, no narration, just evidence, one after the other. Slide after slide revealed the web they'd built scholarship recipients who didn't exist. Donor funds, rerouted charity partners with nothing behind the names but P.O. boxes and tax shields. And me, my name, my identity, woven into every document. I scanned the crowd. Their smiles were gone now. Some were whispering. Some just stared. At the front table, my mother had gone pale. Her hands trembled slightly in her lap. Lena sat rigid, beside her eyes wide but unreadable. Victor stepped back. Wade had vanished from his seat entirely. Then came the final slide, a spreadsheet outlining a pattern of laundering with my name appearing across every approval and guarantor line. That was when the police entered. They moved swiftly but calmly. 2 officers heading for Victor, another 2 toward the exits. One of them made a beeline for Wade, who was already trying to blend into a catering group. Victor's voice was low but clear. "There's been a mistake," but no one moved to protect him. An officer read the charges. Victor didn't resist. Wade was handcuffed just outside the side door. A woman near the bar gasped audibly. The room was silent in the way only guilt can quiet people. I stepped away from the stage. No need to bow. No need for applause. I walked past the tables, past the silence, past Lena and Margot, who looked at me like they were trying to recognize someone they'd never taken the time to really know. Lena stood. Her voice cracked, barely audible. "You didn't have to do it like this." I met her eyes. "You didn't have to do it at all." I turned back to the crowd. "I used to be silent," I said. "But not today." Then I walked out. Not triumphant, not angry. Just free. And for the first time in my life, they had no say in what came next. It had been a week since the gala, since the lights dimmed, and the weight of everything I'd carried for years finally cracked open under public scrutiny. People stopped me in the street now. Neighbors, old co-workers, even strangers at the grocery store, offering sympathetic smiles or words of quiet admiration. But the truth is, I wasn't looking for applause. I wasn't seeking vindication. I just wanted silence to mean peace for once. Not shame. That morning I woke early. The light in my apartment looked different somehow. Softer. Cleaner. The air felt less crowded. I made tea instead of coffee and left the cup untouched on the counter. There was one last thing I needed to do. I drove with the windows down, letting the wind mess with my hair and the sun catch on the edge of my sunglasses. I took the long route, through the old neighborhoods I used to ride my bike in as a girl past the playground where I'd once helped Lena down from the slide, her chubby arms clutching me like I was the whole world. The house came into view slowly the way memory does. Still neat, still modest, with the same curtain pattern my mother had kept for decades. Rosebuds faded now by years of afternoon sun. The mailbox leaned a little to the left. It always had. I parked across the street and sat for a moment, watching the wind bend the branches of the big elm tree in the front yard. Its leaves whispered in a language only time understood. The envelope was in my coat pocket. Cream-colored, no name on the front, just the familiar weight of something final. Inside was a letter. No accusations, no explanation of hurt or betrayal, just a few sentences written in my own hand, steady and clear. "I forgive you, but I'm no longer the daughter you can reach for only when you need something. Please take care of yourself. I didn't sign it with love. I didn't need to." I stepped out of the car, gravel crunching underfoot, and crossed the street with deliberate steps. At the mailbox, I paused. My fingers brushed over the worn metal handle. It felt cooler than I expected, like it held more memory than metal. I opened the door and slipped the envelope inside, closing it with a soft click, the kind of sound that doesn't echo but settles. I stood there a moment longer, letting the moment breathe. Then I looked up at the windows of the house, unsure if she was watching, unsure if I wanted her to be. But no curtain shifted. No silhouette moved, just the stillness of a house that had learned to look away. Turning back to the car, my steps felt lighter. As I slid into the driver's seat, I reached into my bag and pulled out something else, the pen. It had taken me years to fix it. Not because it was difficult, but because I never thought it was worth restoring. It was a gift from my father, long before he passed. An old-fashioned fountain pen with a brass cap and a tiny scratch across the clip. I used to carry it everywhere. Job interviews, lease signings, graduation cards for Lena. It had written so many signatures I barely thought about it anymore. But now it was polished, restored. The craftsman Rowena had referred me to had even managed to engrave something new along the side in place of the worn initials, "Write your name," in your own hand, my father's words. He'd said it once when I was still a teenager, struggling through my first grown-up disappointment. "Being kind is hard, Elara," he'd told me, resting a hand on my shoulder. "But never let anyone write your name for you." I had forgotten that part. For years, I thought kindness meant silence, that love meant sacrifice, that family meant endurance at all costs. I had blurred myself out of pictures just to make space for everyone else to shine. But this pen, this tiny object with its metal heart, reminded me I had a hand in the story too. I always did. I turned the pen over in my palm, the engraving catching the sunlight. My fingers curled around it, not in fear, not in desperation, but in something steadier. Ownership. I started the engine but didn't drive away immediately. Instead, I looked at the house one last time. Not searching for closure. Not hoping for a figure to appear in the window with tears or apologies. I just looked. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel small in front of it. I didn't feel like the child waiting to be seen, or the sister waiting to be appreciated, or the daughter hoping to be chosen. I was just Elara, entirely myself. I placed the pen gently into the glove compartment, rolled down the window, and let the wind in again. As the house disappeared in the rearview mirror, so did the weight I hadn't even realized I'd still been carrying. No more unspoken debts. No more rewriting myself to be useful, acceptable quiet. I had written my letter, and I had meant every word. I didn't need her to read it today. Maybe she never would. Maybe she'd toss it aside like a bill she didn't owe. That didn't matter anymore. It wasn't for her. It was for me. The room was nothing extravagant. No chandeliers, no string quartets, no name tags printed in gold foil. Just folding chairs, natural light from tall windows, and the quiet sound of sneakers shifting against the floor. And yet, standing at the front of the hall that morning, I felt more at home than I had in any family gathering, boardroom, or holiday dinner in my life. The banner above the table read, "The Quinn Foundation, Helping Hands for Tomorrow." Just 12 words printed in soft navy blue, but they felt like an anthem, a declaration of who I'd become and what I'd chosen to build from the wreckage. I named it after my father, Quinn. He'd never lived long enough to see the way things unraveled, or the way I learned to stitch myself back together, but he had planted the seeds. The old pen, the old advice, and now this. Each folder on the table in front of me carried more than a scholarship. It carried possibility. A second chance, a whispered yes, in a world too quick to say no to girls who dream. Most of them had never been told they were allowed to reach. I saw them sitting now. 15 girls, aged 16 to 21, each of them clutching a paper folder in their lap as if it might vanish if they blinked. Their faces carried a familiar tension, hope and hesitation, locked in a silent tug of war. I knew that feeling. I had lived in it for years. Rowena stood off to the side, arms crossed loosely over her chest, a proud smirk tugging at her lips. She hadn't said it aloud, but I could tell this moment meant something to her too, not just for what we'd uncovered, but for what we were building in its place. One of the girls near the edge of the group caught my eye. She looked about 16, thin-framed hair pulled back in a neat ponytail, and a face still somewhere between adolescence and steel. When we made eye contact, she stood slowly and approached the front. Her steps were quiet but firm. She reached the table and stopped, just in front of me. "Are you the one who started this?" she asked, her voice clear but barely above a whisper. "I am," I replied, smiling gently. She hesitated, then looked down at the envelope in her hand. "My name is Camille," she said. "My mom told me not to dream too far. Said it would only make it worse when nothing worked out." I felt the words hit somewhere deep. An old bruise pressed gently. Camille looked up again, her eyes still searching. But I applied anyway. "I saw your name on the brochure. I thought maybe this time I'd try for something I wasn't supposed to have." My throat tightened. Not from sadness, from recognition. I stepped closer, keeping my voice low but firm. "Camille, no one gets to draw your lines for you. Not your mother, not your school, not your past. Only you." She blinked hard, nodding once. I placed a hand lightly on her shoulder. She smiled then, a little crooked, a little shy, but unmistakably real. When she returned to her seat, I turned back to the table and reached for the pen. It had taken weeks to find someone who could repair it just the way I wanted. The brass was polished now, the clip no longer scratched, and the engraving along the side gleamed with fresh silver. Keep it true. Keep it real. The words felt different now, not just a reminder, a commitment. I took the first folder, opened it, and signed at the bottom of the award certificate. My handwriting was calm, controlled. The pen moved smoothly, leaving a clean line of ink that whispered of quiet power. No hesitation. No borrowed signatures. No more writing checks in exchange for silence. One by one, I signed each award, my fingers steady and my breath light. When I reached the last folder, I paused and looked out across the room. Some of the girls were already flipping open their envelopes. One of them had tears in her eyes. Another was nudging her friend and whispering behind her hand, grinning like she'd won the lottery. I couldn't help it. I smiled. Not wide, not performative. Just the kind of soft, genuine smile that comes from finally standing in a space you made for yourself. There was no applause when I finished. No reporters. No hashtags trending. Just that rare and sacred thing, impact without noise, and that I'd come to realize was the kind of legacy that actually lasts. Rowena joined me at the front, placing her hand on my back as I slipped the pen into my coat pocket. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded. Better than okay. We watched as the students stood and began to trickle out, some waving goodbye, others lingering to talk to volunteers or reread their letters. Camille glanced back once before she reached the door, and I raised a hand in quiet salute. She returned it with both hands, her folder clutched tightly against her chest. The room slowly emptied, the light shifting as the sun moved higher in the sky. I walked to the window and looked out. The foundation's name was printed on a small sign near the walkway, just visible through the glass, Quinn Foundation, and underneath, in smaller letters, "Helping Hands for Tomorrow." I traced the words with my eyes. For years, I had tried to make myself useful enough to be loved. To be needed was the closest I thought I'd ever get to being valued. But standing here now, I finally understood my worth wasn't rooted in sacrifice. It lived in intention, in voice, in action. I had written myself back into my own story. And this chapter, it was only the beginning. Have you ever found yourself giving and giving until there was nothing left for you? Maybe you've been the quiet one in your family, the one they counted on but never truly saw. If you've ever felt overlooked, unheard, or used in the name of love, then you know what Elara went through. But here's the truth, it's never too late to reclaim your story. We'd love to hear yours. Have you ever had to walk away from someone you love to protect your peace? Or learn to say no after a lifetime of saying yes? Share your thoughts in the comments. We read every single one. And if Elara's journey moved you, make sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell, and join us next time for more stories of quiet strength, bold healing, and second chances. Because your voice matters here. And sometimes hearing one story is all it takes to find your own.